What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Something About Sports podcast. This is your host once again, Leon Edwards. I just want to say welcome back. I know a lot of you guys that don't listen for the local stuff, you've been waiting for a little while, man. It's been a while. So I apologize, it's been a while, but I promise anytime I have one of these gaps, I will come back. I'm not going to stop doing this. So just hang in there with me. Been a lot going on. Not only has a lot just happened outside of sports and things like that, but even just in sports, there's just been so much stuff going on. I want to try to cover all of that stuff as fast as possible because there's always something else to talk about when it comes to sports. I want to always try to cover that stuff as fast as possible and get as much into these as I can. And sometimes that means I'll fall a little bit behind if the other things happen. And then we got the NFL draft. I wanted to cover the Chiefs draft for a lot of my folks that want to hear that. So it's been a lot going on, a lot of things happening in sports and different things like that. So I want to hop right into this, but I just want to say thank you guys that have been continuing to support. These last few episodes have been doing really good. More people are listening. Those of you guys that are sharing, that are supporting, that are word of mouthing, whatever it is, I appreciate it. That stuff goes a long way and it helps a lot. I just want to say thanks one more time. I know I thank you guys all the time, but I want to continue to say thanks. Before I hop into this, let me go ahead and just say, follow me on Instagram, SA_sports_podcast, Something About Sports on YouTube, sasports913@gmail.com as well. And then don't forget to rate on all the podcasting platforms. That stuff helps as well. Make other people that may not be familiar with me, make them want to listen if I have good ratings. So thank you guys so much for all that you have been doing for me. And without further ado, I want to just hop right into talking about this. Now, there's going to be some things that I don't get to talk about that I wanted to talk about just because of time. Those of you guys that listen to every episode, you've heard me talk a decent amount about the draft. Those of you guys that don't listen to every episode, the draft is far enough away now that I don't think you guys probably care anymore. I had some stuff to talk about from the NFL draft, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to table that. We'll talk about some of those guys as we get closer to the season. We'll talk about some of that stuff as we get closer to the season. There was a couple of other things as well that I did want to talk about that I'm going to just table for now and just try to squeeze in some of this other stuff. Thank you guys for bearing with me. Those of you guys that wanted to hear that stuff, write me. Hit me up on Instagram. Hit me up in my email or YouTube or wherever you guys want to reach out. Write me and let me know, hey, I still wanted to hear you talk about that. Maybe I can do a short episode or figure something out. But there is going to be some stuff that I missed from this new cycle. It's just been a long time since I talked to you guys about a lot of stuff. And there's some stuff that I really feel like is non-negotiables that I really want to talk about. The newest piece of history, I guess I can say now, is Russell Westbrook, which just happened. Russell Westbrook broke Oscar Robertson's all-time record for triple-doubles in NBA career. And those of you guys that listen to every episode, in a previous episode, I actually don't remember the episode number, but I'm going to try to find it. But you guys know I talked about him extensively in a previous episode, so I don't want to get too much on a tangent. I just want to shout him out and say I've always liked Russell Westbrook. He's one of the most entertaining NBA players of all time, one of the most entertaining players that I've ever watched in my life. And he continues to bring that. And also the tenacity that he brings to the game and plays with every night. It allows him to end up in a position like this. You guys can go listen to episode 4 if you want to hear me talk about Russell Westbrook and how I feel about him. All that stuff's in episode 4. I talked about him for quite a while in that episode. So go back, check out episode 4 if you want to hear that. But I did want to shout him out. You guys that have been listening, I love Russell Westbrook. I love the tenacity he plays with, and I hope he gets a ring one day. But I at least wanted to highlight that because that's a pretty big piece of news. So I did want to talk about that. So since we're on the topic of the NBA, I'll just go ahead and knock out the NBA stories that I want to talk about. I am going to put out another episode before the NBA playoffs start, I promise. And I'm going to give my playoff preview. I'm going to talk about what I think about every team, different things like that. I know I haven't been talking too much about the NBA. I've been covering certain stories that I want to talk about, but I will put that out. I'll talk about who I think deserves all the awards, different things like that. I'll make sure I get that to you guys for those of you guys wondering when that's coming, because the NBA season is really winding down. We're getting headed into the play-in tournament. So I'll make sure I get that to you guys before the playoffs start for those of you that want to hear it. I do have 2 other stories that I want to talk about in the NBA, and they involve 2 guys that are actually really close friends, Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James. So let me go ahead and talk about Carmelo Anthony first. Carmelo Anthony broke into the top 10 all-time NBA scoring list. That's not a small feat. Carmelo Anthony is legitimately one of the best scorers in the history of the NBA. And when you think about it, he's only had one scoring title in the time that he's been in the NBA. And that is probably, I saw a lot of people discrediting him for that. And I actually think that probably makes it even a little bit more remarkable. Those of you guys that know me well, a lot of you guys know that I love Carmelo Anthony. At one point in time, he was my favorite player when him and LeBron were coming out of high school and it was a legitimate conversation. I was always Team Melo. I thought he was just a really good player. Then he went to Syracuse and broke the hearts of my Jayhawks. It knocked it down a little bit, but I always have liked his game. I've always thought that he was a really talented, polished basketball player. A guy that can play the game at the highest level. And now he's going to go down in history as one of the best scorers the game has ever seen. But going back to my other point, for him to only lead the league in scoring one time and still be a top 10 scorer, you think about other guys who have had multiple scoring titles in their careers that aren't on that top 10 list, it makes you wonder. I think it's just more, it speaks more to the consistency he was able to score. This is something that he could do year in and year out. As long as he was healthy, which he most of the time was healthy, Carmelo Anthony could literally go out there every single night and get you 25 points. And there just have not been that many guys in the history of the NBA that can do that. You've had guys that win no scoring titles, that have a few hot seasons, guys that just go nuclear for a handful of seasons or for a shorter career. Carmelo Anthony has done this for a really long time, and that's why he's in the top 10, because he's done it every night for his entire career. He's figured out how to score at the NBA level in so many different ways, and it's just something that's amazing to watch. And I've been pointing a lot of this stuff out because these guys that are in the twilights of their career, you guys have heard me, just like I mentioned before, I've talked about Russell Westbrook in this category. These guys that are in the twilights of their career, we start to nitpick at them a little bit when we realize that they're not the best player ever. We know that this has been the LeBron James era. Everybody cannot be LeBron James. Just because they are not does not mean that they aren't great. Just because Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James were pit against each other in high school and LeBron ended up being the better player and Carmelo Anthony was still a very talented player that maybe hasn't probably lived up to that talent, that does not mean that he still can't be great. Carmelo Anthony has been a great NBA player for a really long time. This is a guy who future generations will look back on and study him. They will study how he scores. That's the type of scorer that this guy is. He's not a KD where he's just taller than everybody. Now, he is stronger than most guys, but the instincts he has on the glass, a lot of people underestimate that. You see him get those offensive putbacks or even putbacks of his own, how he can read the ball coming off the glass, how he can get to his spots. And it's just so automatic when he gets there. Those are just the kind of things he's put the work in to get to that point. That's not just, and then you combine that with talent and you get a guy who's a top 10 all-time scorer. This guy's a great player, one of the best players of this era, one of the best scorers of the history of basketball. He will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Mind you guys, a lot of you guys that don't think that he may warrant a first ballot Hall of Fame because of whatever postseason success, team success, whatever you want to say, the Basketball Hall of Fame is about anything that you've accomplished in basketball in general. Carmelo Anthony has one of the most decorated basketball careers of any player that's active right now. Carmelo Anthony has gold medals. He's been one of the best Olympic basketball players ever since he first put on the red, white, and blue. Carmelo Anthony is an entirely different player with the red, white, and blue, which I'm going to go on a tangent now, and I'll get back to some of the other accolades he has. But that to me let me know that if he ended up on one of these other teams, these super teams, we probably are talking about Carmelo Anthony in an entirely different light. In his prime, if he ended up on one of these super teams like the Heat put together and then the Warriors put together, you had that team with the Celtics. I think if he even going back to just starting his career, think about if he gets drafted to those NBA champion Detroit Pistons that had an amazing team. You had a team with Chauncey Billups, Rasheed Wallace, Richard Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, Ben Wallace. You add a Carmelo Anthony to that, an elite level scorer. I think his career is on a totally different trajectory, and I think that team's probably on a totally different trajectory. But you just have to appreciate these guys that do this for a long time, because we're going to regret it when we look back. we're going to look back on it in a different light than right now. Right now, we're in this era where we just want to crap on everybody. We want to talk about everything that people do bad, and we don't want to appreciate greatness. And I have been a victim of that. I feel like with age and maturity, I've learned to appreciate greatness, even from teams and players that I may not like, but you have to in the moment. And I think one of those things that really drove that home for me was Kobe Bryant. And luckily for me, because I'm a Celtics fan, for those of you guys that haven't heard me talk about that on the podcast, I never was a Kobe lover, but did I respect the dude? I had to. Same thing with LeBron James. LeBron James came in when the Celtics were kind of in their run as well. I was never a LeBron lover. I really am not even a big fan of LeBron James to this day as a basketball player. But do I respect him? Yes. Has he been the best player in the NBA for a while now? Yes. Is he one of the top 5 best players ever? Yes. You can't take that away from him, regardless of what you feel about these guys. Carmelo Anthony's one of the 10 best point getters in the history of the NBA, and maybe even better than that. He's going to continue to play and continue to climb that list. I think he has a few good years left in him. You got to really tip your cap to a guy like Carmelo Anthony. You got to think about this. This is a guy who was out of the NBA for an entire season just a few years ago. They tried to blackball him. They tried to label him a bad teammate. They tried to say he wouldn't take lesser roles. Things that he literally had to go on TV and plead for a job pretty much. And this is one of the best players of a generation. And that's what he was reduced to doing. And he did that because he wanted to play so bad. He comes back and he accomplishes this. And I just hate seeing people try to discredit it. It's just one of those things that just burns me up, because this guy should be everything that you want out of a basketball player. And they tried to push him out and he still kept working. He came back better. He came back to the Blazers with a whole new perspective on the game. He was willing to come off the bench. He was willing to pick his spots for scoring. He was willing to move the ball. He played a lot better defense. He was chasing rebounds. This is just a guy who he wants to win. He wants to play. I mean, he's proven that. And I'm just happy to see him get to where he is right now. But going back to that Hall of Fame talk, because I just remembered that I got off on a tangent and forgot to finish that. Carmelo Anthony's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I talked about his Olympic success. He won a college basketball national championship in a year, was one of the best players in college that year. He won the most outstanding player as well. And then he gets to the NBA and he has the success that he's had. There's no doubt that this guy is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. If you don't think so, I think you probably should reevaluate what you think a Hall of Famer is in basketball. It's a little bit different in basketball than it is in the NFL and different things like that. This is the same Hall of Fame that has multiple active college basketball coaches in it. This isn't the same thing as an NFL or MLB Hall of Fame. So he's going to be a first ballot guy. I'm happy for him. I'm happy to see him accomplish that when just a few years ago it was looking like he may never play in another NBA game. So I'm happy to see him where he is. And I'm just going to appreciate what I'm watching. I'm going to appreciate this greatness for the rest of his career. I'm going to just continue to enjoy that. I just wanted to make sure I highlighted that with Carmelo. There's one more NBA story, which was LeBron James. There's been a lot of different things going on with LeBron James. Just even going back to the whole tweet situation, the Ma'Khia Bryant tweet situation, no matter what you feel about that, I think LeBron James has turned into the guy that everybody wants to attack. He's become that dude. He's been so vocal and outspoken, and he's been, I don't want to say an activist, but he's been like a catalyst for a lot of conversations to happen. I think that he's become that guy that everybody wants to attack. And again, people who are listening to this that know me personally, they know that I've never been a fan of LeBron James. I probably would never defend him in a basketball conversation just for the hell of it, to hear what people had to say about him. But I do respect him as a player. I respect him as a man. I think he's done a lot of good for the game of basketball. He's done a lot of good for the world, for his community that he came from. So I appreciate that we have had a chance to have him as a sports icon in our era. I do. And I think that in this age, this is the Jordan rules effect for LeBron James. We find a tweet or we find something that he says that we say, you don't really live a hard life anymore. You can't say that. You can't say you relate to this, or you have too many fans to speak your truth or to speak your opinion, because you're turning people against other people. And it starts this conversation about him. And he's been used as a political tool. His name comes up in places you would never think it would come up. And I think he's become that player. And I think that we should remember all of the good things that he's done. And that's no matter what side of the fence you are on any of this stuff. I don't really want to get into that on the podcast right now. There's too much other stuff to talk about. But no matter what side you are on a lot of this stuff, the Ma'Khia Bryant situation or any of this stuff that's been going on in our country, no matter what side of this you are on, I think we can all take a step back and at least recognize the things that this man has tried to do, coming from where he came from, especially a kid who never went to college, bringing his friends with him, making them all gain education, making them all earn their way into his circle of trust and into jobs with him. I think that's just something that's very admirable. And we have to at least appreciate that. No matter who you are, you have to appreciate that. No matter if you agree with what he's saying, no matter if you agree with him saying anything at all, which I think I think that's ridiculous personally. I will say that these are people. Athletes are people. So I will say that part. Athletes are people. They have opinions. They have things that they feel strongly about, just like you and I. So I will say that part. So I think you're wrong if you think he shouldn't be saying anything at all. But if you think that, regardless of what you think in that situation, we have to take a step back and we have to at least understand the side of the story he's coming from. This isn't a guy who went to college, who's well traveled before he got to the NBA. He's been in the NBA for more of his life than he hasn't at this point. And I think that a lot of people tend to forget that he grew up in this lifestyle. He grew up in this, and he's still doing the best that he can to make the world better. There's going to be missteps. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be things that everybody doesn't agree with, but we have to at least appreciate it for what we have, because we don't get a lot of athletes like that, whether they're trying to make a difference for something you agree with or not. We don't get a lot of athletes like that want to make a difference and actually want to make other people's lives better. So we have to appreciate that. Those of you guys that know me well, I know you're probably surprised hearing this, but it's just something that I felt had to be talked about. It's something that I think it's been eating away at me a little bit, just because I hate to see a guy who's done so much like he has, and a guy who seems like he genuinely just wants the world to be better for everybody. I hate to see a guy like that end up in a situation where he just becomes this pariah or this name that we just throw out every time we want to talk about people that shouldn't be talking about something or whatever the case. So I don't want to see him fall into that, because I think he's a lot more than that to his community, to the Black community, to basketball and as a whole across the world. So I just want to say we should probably appreciate that for what we have. You guys hear me say that a lot. For those of you that listen to the podcast regularly, you hear me say that a lot. We do need to appreciate some of this stuff. It's hard to step back and do that in real time, but that is something that we have to do. Those of you, like I said, that were surprised to hear me say that, I of course have to have something that I gotta crap on LeBron for. He spoke out about the play-in tournament. Now that the Lakers are in jeopardy of being in the play-in tournament, he spoke out about it, and he talked about how he thinks that it's stupid and different things like that. And I just feel like at that point, he's got to understand where we're coming from. LeBron has been in the finals for how many years out of the last 10 or 15? Nobody cares that your team is in sixth place. We want your team to be in sixth place and seventh place. We want to see your team in the play-in tournament. This isn't something that we heard last year. I know it was fresh off of COVID and you guys just wanted to play, and I know that's the defense, is that we just wanted to play no matter what the rules were or whatever. Fans objectively can say, we appreciate having this tournament. I think I've been saying for years the NBA needs to have a midseason tournament, whether that's around All-Star weekend, whether that's at a different time. They should have a midseason tournament. They can pick if they want to play their main guys or their G League guys or whatever. I don't think that should matter if they want to give their main guys a break. Put a cash prize up for the winners per player. You'll get the sponsors, you'll get the TV deals, you'll get all that stuff. But I don't see why the NBA doesn't do something like that. All the other leagues play tournament play, pool play, different things like that. I don't understand why not the NBA. I think that's something that would just help keep the competitive spirit going, because the NBA season gets pretty monotonous a lot. So I'm off on another tangent already. I can tell this episode is going to be long. But anyway, I think LeBron's just got to be quiet about that one. We didn't hear any complaints about that when his team wasn't in it. Just different things like that. I think that he's just got to take it for what it is. His team's been injured. He hasn't been playing. And when he came back, he didn't look like himself every game, all game. They've got to deal with that. Just like every other NBA player has had to deal with those situations. All the other greats have dealt with those situations. Nobody talks about that. And it's because LeBron stays healthy. But he does enough to where his team can still continue to win, and he always has a team that has some of the most talent in the league. So even if other big name guys on his team get hurt and he's playing, there's still enough out there to win. So I think that he's got to take this. Steph Curry's been looking at this situation for the last couple of years. Draymond Green looked at that situation last year, and I'm not saying he's on the level of LeBron, but you got to think about these contending teams. All these other teams have dealt with this stuff. LeBron's been a little bit more exempt to it, but that doesn't mean that he is fully exempt of it. And now that his team's in that situation, he can complain about things. I just think that's unfair, especially to the guy who came up with the idea. I had his name, but I don't see where I wrote it down at. But I did have his name. I wanted to put his name out there, but I'll find it and maybe add it in here later. But yeah, he called the guy out and said he thinks he should be fired and this and that. I just feel like that's just doing too much. I think he should just take wherever his team ends up. If they got to play in the play-in tournament, play in the play-in tournament. If you're good enough to make it to the finals, you'll make it there. We know that already. I tend to lean towards the Lakers probably making the finals again this year if everybody's 100% and fully healthy. But either way, he's got to take that to the chin just like every other star has had to deal with. I don't think he's exempt from that. And I think that he is more so just a little bit frustrated with the situation, and he's taking it out in that way. But I think he's just got to live with that one and take that to the chin. So LeBron, nobody other than Lakers fans really care that you don't like the play-in tournament now that your team's going to have to play in it. We want to see you play in the play-in tournament. So just buckle up and get ready for it. Nobody's going to feel sympathy for you. We've seen you in the finals too many times in a row at this point to feel sympathy for you. Just get ready for it and hope your team gets out of there. All right, so I was contemplating what I wanted to talk about next, but I think I'll go ahead and hop into talking about the NFL. Got a couple NFL stories I want to talk about. I had a third one, but I think I'm going to hold off on that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the whole Ja'Wuan James, Denver Broncos situation, but I'm going to hold off on that. As training camp gets closer, we'll probably have a better opportunity to talk about that. So I say around training camp starting, you can probably hear me talk a little bit about that stuff, the injuries and the guaranteed money, the CBA and all that stuff. I'll get into that later on down the road for the sake of time. But the other two stories I wanted to talk about, the first one's going to be DK Metcalf trying his luck in track. I feel even though he didn't finish first in his heat or do anything extraordinary, I just think that it's cool to see some of the other top athletes in the world compete in a sport like that, in track or whatever. I feel like I would like to see that even more. But I just want to congratulate him for even taking that chance, for putting himself out there like that and having a good showing. For a big dude, he was moving. He was hanging with those guys. It's not like they dusted him by multiple seconds. He was right there with the pack. I was very impressed by what I saw from DK Metcalf. I saw a lot of people saying Tyreek Hill should do that and all that stuff. As a Chiefs fan, I don't know how big of a fan I am of the idea, but I think Tyreek Hill is probably one of the fastest people in the world. I do genuinely believe that. So I think that if he did, he might even fare a little bit better than DK. Granted, DK's carrying like 6'4", I think 260, 270 or something crazy like that. Don't quote me on his height. On his weight. I think he's 6'3", 6'4". I'm pretty sure he's a big dude. He's carrying a lot of weight. I know he's over 250s. He's over 250 for sure, I would imagine. He's carrying a lot more weight than Tyreek, a lot more height. But I do think Tyreek's probably a little faster. But it's just good to see stuff like that. We always wonder what these guys would do in these situations. We saw DK Metcalf hawk down Budda Baker after that pick that he thought was a automatic pick six, and he just hawked him down and saved a touchdown, actually. And I think after that, kind of the imagination of everybody got going a little bit. Just what a feat by him. I'm glad he took the chance. I'm glad he put himself out there. So I just wanted to shout him out. The second story I want to talk about with the NFL is going to be a little bit longer, and it's this whole Aaron Rodgers situation. So I've been seeing a lot of people talk about this. I've gone back and forth on where I really stand with it. I'm a really big Aaron Rodgers fan. I've always liked Aaron Rodgers since the very first time I got to watch him play in the NFL. I will admit that I was more of an Alex Smith guy coming into the draft. I didn't know a whole lot about Aaron Rodgers coming into the draft. I did think he was good, though. I was privy to his highlights at least, but I was more of an Alex Smith guy. I think most people were at the time. But from the very first time I saw him play in the NFL after sitting those couple of years, I thought he was one of the best quarterbacks I'd ever watched. And I still think that. I think he's one of the most talented quarterbacks I've ever seen walk on a football field. I enjoy watching Aaron Rodgers. I still think he's one of the more underappreciated players probably of all time, and he will be until other people look back on his career and understand what we watched. But either way, that's not what I really want to talk about. It's not just an Aaron Rodgers love session. I actually want to talk about this whole Green Bay situation where he's requested a trade and had all those different things like that. I just want to talk about where I stand on this because I've heard a lot of different opinions, and if I'm being honest, I'm actually surprised by the majority. The majority has seemed to side more with the Packers and be against Aaron Rodgers in this. And it kind of confuses me a little bit. And I think that we've been conditioned to just not like Aaron Rodgers. I think that's what I've come down to, because even when Tom Brady left New England, when they had that whole situation where he made them trade away Jimmy G, we don't talk about that stuff a lot, but that stuff happened. We really don't talk about it because we love Tom Brady. He's the GOAT. He's won a lot of Super Bowls. I get that. But if you boil it down, he's still a franchise quarterback. He has a lot more accolades. I understand that. But nobody else has those in the history of the game. There's only one. There's only Tom Brady. The accolades that Aaron Rodgers has, nobody else in the NFL has those either. And I think we forget about that. But he's still one of a kind in his own. Drew Brees just retired with no MVPs. Aaron Rodgers just won his third. And I'm not definitively saying he can't win another one. So those are the type of things that I think we forget about. But Aaron Rodgers is a legitimate franchise quarterback. He could walk into just about any team in the NFL right now and make them a playoff team. I genuinely believe that he is that good. And I think that the Green Bay Packers fumbled the bag a little bit. Some of you guys may not be familiar with that terminology. I think they messed this up. I think that they tarnished this relationship a little bit. I think they just assumed that everything was going to be fine no matter what they did. And it probably should be. They've been winning. They've been paying him a lot of money. But you got to think from Aaron Rodgers' situation, he's got to look around at the other top guys in the NFL. You think about Patrick Mahomes and you think about Tom Brady. Those are the two probably most people would say first if you ask about NFL quarterbacks right now. Aaron Rodgers is probably right there in that same conversation. But for the sake of this one, he's the one we're talking about. You think about Patrick Mahomes, what just happened in the Super Bowl? Patrick Mahomes ran for almost 500 yards in the backfield, evading pass rushes from a four-man rush, because his offensive line was so depleted and banged up and just not that good, that the Chiefs went out, spent boatloads of money, draft capital on offensive linemen. They did exactly what they needed to do to keep him happy, keep him upright. And I'm sure that's what he was asking for. Take it back a year. After they win the Super Bowl, they get their first round pick. More of a luxury pick. The Chiefs didn't have any huge gaping holes at the time. What'd they do? They call Patrick Mahomes and ask him who he wants to draft. It's just those small little subtle things like that. You think about Tom Brady. Well, Tom Brady got a chance to come to Tampa Bay and pick his team. He brought any and everybody he wanted to bring there. He really got Antonio Brown on that team just a couple of months after Bruce Arians basically said it was a no-go. He basically said there was no way Antonio Brown was playing on that team. He wasn't a fit. He didn't want him there. Tom Brady shows up. Where's Antonio Brown? Right there with him. I think that people forget that. And a lot of times we forget about this Tom Brady situation. Tom Brady's situation wasn't just about money. It was a lot about money. Tom Brady, he did take a little bit less money a lot of his career to not be the highest paid quarterback, to keep a good team around him. He wanted that reciprocated in the twilight of his career. These are his last few years of earning potential. He wanted to have that reciprocated and have the Patriots pay him top dollar. They didn't want to do that. But on top of that, he didn't really have a lot of pull in personnel decisions. He didn't really have a lot of pull in the different things they did on the field. I think that stuff plays into it. And they were winning, so winning heals a lot of stuff. But that stuff's been boiling over in New England for a long time. And I think that people don't pay attention to those small subtleties. You just think about those two guys. Aaron Rodgers probably doesn't have any other guys that are close to him or equal to him in the NFL other than those two, I will probably say at the moment. Russell Wilson, some people probably will argue, was in that conversation, but we see the pull he's had with that organization as well. I think that it's just I think that he's just looking around at that. He's seeing teams invest and go after it when they're in those Super Bowl windows, allow the quarterback to lead the team, allow the team to become the quarterback's team. And I think the Packers are the Packers. They're one of those franchises that no matter who's playing for them, they're always going to be the Packers. It's not Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. It's not Rodgers' team. It's the Packers. The Cowboys are one of those type of teams. Jerry Jones is not going to let anybody outshine him in Dallas. That's one of those teams. You just have those franchises where it's who they are regardless. And I think that the Packers fell into that a little bit too much. They go to an NFC championship. They turn around in the draft. And instead of finding help to get them over the hump that next year with a lot of the team back, the coach coming into his second year, Aaron Rodgers coming into his second year in the scheme, they go out and they trade up for a quarterback. So not only do they draft a quarterback in the first round when they could have taken a myriad of other positions to help right away, they trade other draft capital to get them. I think that was probably, I don't know what number nail in the coffin for this relationship, but it was a big one, I would imagine. And I don't know if it was just about them drafting a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers got drafted while Brett Favre was a quarterback of the Packers. I know it was a little bit different situation. I think Brett Favre was probably even closer to being done than Aaron Rodgers is with Jordan Love being drafted now, but even still, I think he understands that. He knows that's the game of football, but then you factor in that they don't tell him that's happening. You factor in that we're right in the middle of a championship window. We could use some help on the defense. We could use some help at wide receiver, which that's a whole nother story as far as wide receiver is concerned. But you just see those, it's those small things that build up, and you end up in a situation like this. And then they turn around in the second round of that same draft and they draft a running back after they already have two good running backs on the team, one of them who's going to be a free agent after that season. So you say, okay, they draft a running back. He's probably going to replace Aaron Jones. And then they turn around in the offseason and they sign Aaron Jones to a bigger deal. So not only did they use that money and a premium pick on the running back position, they didn't get better anywhere else. That money can't go anywhere else. So and those are just small little things. There's been a lot of other stuff that's come out. I've seen some stories where it seems like Rodgers may have been being petty, but I think the biggest theme of this is just that franchise quarterbacks know their worth now. They know what it means to be a franchise quarterback. The franchises that value their quarterbacks are showing these other franchises up a little bit, because you think about Aaron Rodgers, you think he would have loved to have a little bit better offensive line after that game against the Buccaneers? I sure think so. You think he would have loved to have a better defense? For sure. You think he would have loved to have a better receiver that wouldn't drop a 2-point conversion that changes the whole complexion of the game? I bet he does. A lot of people don't talk about that. People talk about him not scoring on that drive and then kicking that field goal. People don't talk about that last drive before that where Rodgers let him down to a touchdown, had a wide open 2-point conversion, dropped. That field goal ties the game if he just catches that pass. So you have these different situations. These things have been building up for Aaron Rodgers for a long time now in Green Bay. And I think it's just boiling over this offseason. And I think he's just ready for a new start, or he's at least ready for some commitment. Because I haven't even added in there the fact that his contract is only guaranteed for this upcoming season. He doesn't have any other stability or certainty, I guess I can say. He doesn't have any other certainty past this season. And I don't think he's trying to strong arm him and say, don't move on to the kid if you want to move on. But if you're going to move on, at least let me go somewhere else where I can get some stability. Football's a violent game. Football's one of those games where one hit, one play, it can end it for you. He wants to have that stability. He wants to have the opportunity to make that money, even if the Packers don't want to pay him. And I think that's fair. That's the power that these players have now. That's the power that he sees these other quarterbacks have now. It's just part of the game. Athletes have more power in every sport. Not all of them are exercising it the way that players in football and basketball are doing, but they have it still, and eventually they will exercise that power. It's just part of the game now. They're starting to realize the money that they make for these teams and the pool that they can have with these teams. We'll see it happen more and more. Some people aren't going to like it. It's part of the evolution of sports, of professional sports in this country. It's just part of it. And we'll just continue to see that happen. I think there's just been a lot of factors that go into this Aaron Rodgers situation. I see where he's coming from as far as just maybe want an organization that'll treat him like a franchise quarterback, even if it's just for his twilight. He just wants that feeling. He wants to be able to have the input. He wants them to call him and ask who they want to draft and what he thinks about these guys. He wants that stuff. And that's not unfair for him to want, because there are teams out there that'll do it for him. And he's just saying, if I can't be that here, let me go be that somewhere else before I'm not able to do it anymore. And I don't disagree with that. I don't think that's so wrong. Now, I think going about it the way he's going about it a little bit, some of the stuff can be petty, talking about certain people that they cut, different things like that. But even when you talk about that, a lot of people laughed about the whole Jake Kumerow situation and him really liking Jake Kumerow. But I think it's those small things. He publicly praised this guy not even a week before they cut him. And then they have this situation where they just go ahead and cut him, don't talk to him about it. They think he has a relationship with the guy. He's looking over at Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes. They've been dragging a guy along who's Patrick Mahomes' friend ever since he came out of the draft. His name's Garrett Dieter. I actually don't think he's a horrible player, but he probably hasn't been as good as some of the other guys they've cut in the time he's been there. He's a really good friend of Patrick Mahomes. That's okay for him to keep him on the team. Patrick Mahomes likes having him on the team. They can talk about ball together. They can talk about other stuff together. They can game together. The Chiefs are just keeping their franchise quarterback happy. Those are the kind of things that these franchises do. It's part of the game you play. This is something that's actually crazy. We do a training at my job. I'm getting on a little tangent here. And I think it applies perfectly because our training for this week it's called retention. It's about retaining customers, of course, but you talk about just retention in general. And it's an ABC model where it says always be courting. Basically saying, your best client is somebody else's best prospect. Your best player is somebody else's best prospect. That is the person they're wishing was on their team. They'll tell them, hey, we'll do this for you. We'll do that for you. We'll do this for our guy so you see it from over there. Maybe one day want to come play with us if the opportunity presents itself. You have guys that are nowhere near as good as Aaron Rodgers in the NFL being treated better than them by their organizations, being able to get input on stuff, being called about decisions that are being made. The Colts called Andrew Luck about trading for Carson Wentz, and Andrew Luck's already retired. They have no tie to this guy at all. They still have the respect to call him about that. Those are the kind of things that is just, you look at him and you see where he's coming from. You got to come with the full picture. There's going to be some things that we don't agree with. There's going to be some stuff, but that's the full picture. You got to look at it that way. So I just want to say, Aaron Rodgers, hope he finds what he's looking for. I hope it's with Green Bay. I think him being a part of that illustrious franchise for his entire career, being another Packer great quarterback, I think that's great for his career. I think that's just it's a great place for him to be. It would be weird to watch him play anywhere else. But a team would, if the Packers started taking calls, the team will give up everything they have right now to get him. And that's because he's that good. And I think the Packers need to start treating him like he's that good, or somebody else will. And that's just what it is. That's enough about that whole Aaron Rodgers situation in the NFL. I'll go ahead and get into some baseball stuff now. Major League Baseball had 2 more no-hitters 2 days apart by the Orioles' John Means against the Seattle Mariners, and then the Cincinnati Reds' Wade Miley against the Cleveland Indians, who, interestingly enough, the Cleveland Indians also got no hit by Carlos Rodon a few weeks back. We had that same team get no hit yet again, but I talked about this before on the podcast when I talked about the first couple no-hitters of the season. It's like, hey, let's get some more of these going as quick as possible so we can maybe see how many we can get in the season. I think that having this many so far, it speaks to something that I'm starting to see trending a lot, and I think that Major League pitching has caught up. So we've seen, like, over the last few years, a lot of different things that baseball has wanted to do with as far as hitting and putting more scoring on. The extra innings rule, we're putting a runner at second, just adding more excitement to the scoring side. And I think that what that's done in turn is forced the rest of the baseball team pretty much, or the rest of the guys out on the field, to be better. It's forced the pitchers especially to get even better with juice balls and things. There's just been so many different things going on over the last handful of years in Major League Baseball that focuses on the offensive side. We haven't talked a lot about the pitching side and what that meant for the pitching side, but I think that we're starting to see the result of that this year. You watch these games and these guys are out here just mowing people down. It just looks like it's a hard time right now to hit major league pitching. And I think that's a byproduct of all the focus that's been put on the offense. Pitchers had to be better to keep a job. I think that's something that we didn't get to talk about a lot, but that's a point to make about these no-hitters, is that I think we're going to see a few more of these. It's just the odds are in our favor now. The more we get early in the season, the more I'm going to think we'll get even more of those, just because of how good the pitching has been and how many games we have left in the season, to where you're going to have aces up every few days and you're going to get a chance to get a few more of those. So I think now where the count is at 4, I wouldn't be surprised if we get 2 or 3 more of those even this season, just because of how many we've had so far already. And I think back to 2019, the last full year, we had a decent amount of those. There was only 1 or 2 of those, I believe, that were actually one pitcher going a no-hitter. I can remember Justin Verlander for sure. I can't remember who else had a no-hitter individually that year. I know there were some combined no-hitters and different things like that, but I do think that this year's a little bit different in that you've already had 4 of these, and they've all been individual pitchers. There haven't been any combined no-hitters. And then you've had even some more no-hitters that were those makeup games. And those of you guys that don't know, if you have a double header now, you got 7-inning games for the second game. So that game is going to be a little bit shorter, and they don't count the no-hitter if that happens. I know Madison Bumgarner's had one off the top of my head. I think there have been a couple of more of those actually as well. Maybe even one combined one by the Mariners. Don't quote me on that. I think it was Seattle that combined for a no-hitter in a 7-inning game. I can't fully remember exactly who. It's been a lot of baseball going on. Been watching a lot of baseball. Been watching a lot of sports in general. And it's been a little while. But to see already having 4 of those, that's the most individual no-hitters that I can remember even seeing in a full season in a while, let alone the first couple of months of a season. That's just one of those things. We're going to see a lot more of that. I think pitching has come a long way because of how hitting was. And I think that a good parallel to this is something that I used to have conversations about all the time with the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors were at a point where they were so good that the rest of the league was trying so hard to catch up to them that when Kevin Durant left, the rest of the league passed them. Sorry, guys, you heard that one of my little things my daughter likes to play with. But anyway, Kevin Durant, when he left the Warriors, before Kevin Durant got there, the Warriors were good enough to win a championship without him. By the time he left, the rest of the league was trying so hard to chase him that they weren't even probably a top 5 team in the NBA anymore. And that just shows you how the leagues adapt. I mean, it's something that I've talked to a lot of Chiefs fans about as well, and why the Chiefs need to keep their foot on the gas. That's another conversation for another day for a 0.5 episode. But it's the same situation, is that you can't just continue to go into every season, every year, thinking that the same thing's going to work, because teams are working around the clock to beat you when you're the best. That's why we saw the Patriots have so much success over the time that they were having their run. Is that Patriots team took so many different forms. Some of those teams were unrecognizable to other ones. You think about the year where Tom Brady and Randy Moss are setting records in the passing game, and then you have a year where Tom Brady's not even a top 10 quarterback in passing yards, and they're smash mouth running offense, and he's killing people on play action. So there's just so many different things that go into that. You have to continue to adjust because everybody around you is doing that. And I think this year in baseball, I'm starting to notice that a lot, is that these teams are a lot preparing their pitchers a lot better. The pitchers are preparing themselves a lot better, adding more pitches, wanting to work on their craft more, because the game has been focused on scoring more runs. And now they've had to adapt to that, because their job, of course, is they get paid to keep teams from scoring runs. And now we're seeing that this year as things start to balance out. I anticipate seeing a couple of more no-hitters this year, just because off the pure odds at this point. We're going to have a lot of games left. It's a full season again. We're going to see more no-hitters. But anyway, I don't want to take away from what these guys did. I want to give both of them their flowers and talk about it. Of course, John Means for the Baltimore Orioles no-hit the Seattle Mariners. His team won 6-0, so he did get a decent amount of run support anyway. He's 4-0 this year. He's been building this for the last couple of years. He had a really good season last year as well. He's really developing into a big-time ace for that team. And he went the full 9, 12 strikeouts, no walks. Just a wonderful game for him. With no walks, though, there was a weird play in that game that actually took away the perfect game. I have to recall it because it's been a little while since I watched it. But there was a weird play that took away the perfect game. I'll have to go back and add that in here. But he didn't have any walks either, which is also awesome. It's something that you don't see a lot in these no-hitters. Usually they go perfect if they have no walks as well. And then you had Wade Miley, who he actually only got 3 runs of run support, so they needed him big time. He went 9 innings, 8 strikeouts, 1 walk as well. Just another marvelous performance for him against those Cleveland Indians, who the Cleveland Indians, they started the season looking like they weren't going to have a whole lot of pop in the lineup, but they started to come along a little bit. That team's, you can see that they're figuring out who they are. They're going to be a team that's built around their pitching as well, but they've got some good young players that are starting to step up and become something. So that team's started to look a little bit better. They're actually leading the American League Central now. They've been on a winning streak, and to see Wade Miley shut them down like that, Wade Miley's a great pitcher anyway. Most people who follow baseball for a while, we all know his name. He's been around a little while. He's a good pitcher. But to see him shut that team down in the middle of a hot streak is not something that we should take lightly. I think that's a big deal that he did that. And then also on that same day, you had Sean Manaea 1 inning away from a perfect game as well. We almost were seeing a no-hitter and a perfect game on the same day. That actually went into the 8th inning, if I'm not mistaken. They were really close. That was against a really good team, though. That was against the Tampa Bay Rays. And that's a really good team. And that team was going to go get him. But yeah, they weren't going to stay down long. Mike Brosseau, who's actually building a little bit of a name for himself, especially after last year's playoffs. But Sean Manaea, old Kansas City friend, came up in the Royals organization as well. Good to see him doing well for himself. And he was also close to having a perfect game that day. Just a really good pitching display to start this season overall in Major League Baseball. I don't think it was something a lot of people probably expected coming into the year. I know I definitely didn't expect to see that coming into the year, just with all the ways that Major League Baseball is trying to up scoring and make it more exciting and different things like that. And you just have seen these players adapt, and now you're seeing that come to fruition with these different situations where the pitchers are really good. And then speaking of really good pitchers, in my last episode, I talked about Shane Bieber leading the league in strikeouts and different things like that. A couple of days later, actually, Jacob deGrom passed him. So Shane Bieber's tied the season lead for the most strikeouts through your first 4 starts in a season. Jacob deGrom actually passed him just a couple of days later. Those of you guys that aren't super familiar with Jacob deGrom or haven't gotten a chance to watch him pitch, he's one of the best pitchers of this entire era. I'll probably say since Clayton Kershaw was like at his peak, I don't remember watching a pitcher as consistently great as Jacob deGrom since then. I actually got a chance, just so happened to be traveling for work one time and ended up going to a Mets game. Got a chance to watch Jacob deGrom pitch in person, and it was just a display of talent, power, passion. The guy's one of the best players in the major leagues right now. Before he's done, you guys want to get a chance to watch him as much as you can. This is a once-in-a-generation type pitcher and a true ace. Not a lot of teams say they can have that, but they definitely have that in New York with Jacob deGrom. He did get put on the injury list. He's been having a couple of injury things. Shane Bieber actually passed him again in the strikeouts because he had to miss his last turn through the rotation. He was a late scratch. I think the same day of the game he got scratched. So he's been dealing with some injury stuff these last couple of weeks, but he has the best ERA in the major leagues. He's still second in strikeouts, only behind Shane Bieber, which is awesome. He's a one-of-a-kind pitcher. He's a guy who probably is the front runner for the Cy Young Award right now. We'll see how all of that plays out for him this year, but I just wanted to go ahead and give him his due while I was talking about baseball, since he did just get that injury, and then also just because he's been so good for a while now. And I think he's been overshadowed a little bit by the mediocrity of the Mets for a lot of that time. Now, the Mets did have a couple good years in there where their pitching staff was right at the forefront of that when they had Matt Harvey and deGrom and Syndergaard and all of that stuff. So they did have that little bit of time right there. But even then, deGrom was more of the unheralded one. And now you get to see him take a step into being that ace, and he's taken that on beautifully and been an insane baseball player for a while. I hate to see him get hurt. I love watching him pitch, and anybody that hasn't had a chance to pay attention or really watch him pitch, you should definitely do that before it's too late. Wow, I don't know if I was rushing through this or if I didn't have as much to say about some of that stuff as I thought, but I'm rounding out to the end of everything I wanted to talk about. And this episode really hasn't even been that long as I anticipated it. I thought this episode would be well over an hour's time, just because you guys know how I get long winded and I'm passionate about a lot of this stuff I talked about today. But I didn't think I would get a chance to talk about Albert Pujols, but I guess I could go ahead and throw that in there while I'm talking about baseball. Albert Pujols was released by the Angels. They told him that he was gonna have a lesser role going forward, and he wanted to play. He's in the twilight of his career. He wanted a chance to get on the field, so they went ahead and released him in the last year of his contract. I just think this is tough. It's tough for Pujols. I think it's a tough look for the Angels personally. I know that they're just trying to win games, so you can't really take that away from him. But he's been kind of on a decline for a while now, and they've stuck with him. So in the last year of the contract, when everybody's anticipating he retire, I think it's just a tough time to see it happen. It's hard to see that happen to Albert. And then also, it's tough for baseball fans because a lot of us grew up watching Albert Pujols. Albert Pujols was one of the best hitters in the world when I was growing up. Watching him right up the road in St. Louis, learning about him, his roots in the Kansas City area. He was one of the guys that, even though I disliked the Cardinals my whole life, I always liked Albert. I always liked Yadi. There were guys on the team that I liked. I mean, Albert was one of those guys, and I've always enjoyed watching him play. He's always been a class act. He's always seemed like a guy who wanted to help with the younger kids and all of that stuff. You hate to see it now because you just don't really know if that ends his career effectively, and you didn't get a chance to see that going away tour for him because you knew it was coming soon, whether it was this year or after one more season or whatever. He's going to hang him up very soon. So to see it go like this and potentially know that it's going to end this way, it's tough just from a fan perspective, and I'm sure it's tough for especially those kids from St. Louis that grew up watching him every day. I didn't get a chance to watch him every day, but anytime I did get a chance to watch him, I did. And the Cardinals were one of the better teams in baseball while I was growing up, so they were on a lot. You got a chance to watch them a lot, and you just hate to see it in that way if it does end that way. I hope he gets another shot somewhere just to at least finish out his career playing on the field and not this way. You just don't want to see people's careers in that way. So I did want to go ahead and say that about Albert Pujols, but now I'm inclined to go back and add other stuff, but I don't think I will. I think I'll just leave this episode where it is, and then we'll just start fresh in episode 8, try to keep up with the times a little bit better. I told you guys that I will do an NBA playoffs preview. I believe I'll probably do that as a special edition episode, just like I did for the NFL draft. You'll probably start to see me do some of those as well, just because I want to try to keep the format of the regular episodes how we do it. I handpick some of these bigger stories in sports and then some of the things that interest me and talk about those. And I don't want to take that away just to have a whole NBA episode, because I know some of you guys listen to me for the baseball stuff or the football stuff or whatever. So I want to be able to continue to provide that. So when I have something that's a lot more singular or focused on one sport, one league, I'll probably try to start doing those special edition episodes. And you guys can write me on Instagram. You can email me and different things like that and let me know what you think about it. SA_sports_podcast is the Instagram. Email is sasports913@gmail. YouTube, something about sports, and then on all the podcast platforms. You guys let me know what you think. Let me know how you feel about this format, and if you like the special edition episodes, if you want me to replace these just to get these episodes out a little faster, if you would just prefer me to replace episode 8 with the NBA playoff preview, I'm open to all the suggestions. I'm open to all that stuff. I want to continue to improve this and continue to make it geared towards the people who are listening. And again, I appreciate everybody who is listening. It seems like the audience is growing a little bit, and that's something that excites me, because it means that you guys that have been hanging out with me from day one are starting to spread the word. You're sharing on socials and different things like that and telling people. So I appreciate all of the support. I appreciate everybody for continuing to listen. Sorry it took me so long one more time to get this episode out. There will be some times like that, but I just want to guarantee you guys I will be back with episodes. I'm not stopping. If it takes me a little bit longer than normal to get an episode out, hang in there with me. I try to do something small in between. I'll post something on socials just so you guys know that I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. I'll continue to make these for you guys. So just keep hanging in there with me. I appreciate the patience. You guys know life happens. I know a lot of you guys listening are parents and husbands, wives, and things like that. Life happens. Things happen. That's just kind of part of this. I'm a one-man band right now that has a job. Other things come up there's going to be times where we have lulls, and I sincerely and deeply appreciate everybody for the patience and for still hanging in there with me and just continuing to support and listen. It's very appreciated and it's noticed. So I just want to say thank you guys. And then just for one last time, I really enjoy suggestions. There have been a few people that have reached out to me, asked me to talk about certain things, asked me when I'm taking guests, different things like that. The email is probably going to be the best way to do it. Please email me. I've said it a couple of times already, sasports913@gmail.com. Email me. Let me know what you guys want to hear. Let me know what you guys want to see me do. I've got some different things in the works, some different things that I can see coming down the pipeline really soon. So just stay tuned in, and I'll continue to give you guys some previews of different things like that. And once again, I want to say thank you guys that are still here listening. And until next time.